The galaxy was wide, endless, and filled with countless voices. Signals of trade, diplomacy, war, and even music crossed the great void between stars every day. Most of them were ordinary, expected, and easily catalogued by the great listening stations that the Galactic Council had set up across the spiral arms. But one day a signal arrived that was not ordinary. It was not expected. It was not even welcome. The signal came from the edge of the Orion Arm, where the stars thinned and the maps grew uncertain. It was a simple distress call, carried on multiple channels, coded with urgency. Normally this would not surprise the Galactic Council. Mining colonies often sent such calls when pirates struck or when reactors failed. Entire fleets were stationed to answer these cries for help. Yet this particular signal was different. The encryption was not like anything the listening stations were used to. At first, the automated systems did not even recognize it as a distress call. It was dense, layered, filled with repeating cycles of codes. Some thought it was a glitch. Others thought it was a pirate trick. But one detail made the analysts lean closer to their screens. The language within the code was human. Humans were still young compared to the old empires of the galaxy. Only a few centuries had passed since Earth had been invited into the Galactic Council. They were still considered reckless, still learning how to manage themselves among the stars. But no one denied that humans had energy, curiosity, and a stubborn strength that few species could match. Now, the human language, English, buried deep within layers of codes, appeared in the distress call. The message was short, repeated over and over. "This is Colony K-47, immediate assistance required. Coordinates attached." The message carried the weight of desperation. It repeated endlessly, the tone flat yet urgent. But the coordinates caused even more concern. They pointed directly into the region known as the Silent Zone. The Silent Zone was a place avoided by almost every species. It was not marked as forbidden by law, but no one traveled there willingly. Ships that entered often failed to return. Strange readings plagued the scanners. Sometimes ghost signals emerged from within. Fragments of languages long extinct, broken cries from ships thought to be destroyed centuries ago. Generations of explorers had whispered stories about it, calling it cursed. Even the most daring traders refused to take shortcuts through its space. So why was there a human colony there? The council gathered quickly. Representatives of dozens of species filled the great chamber, their voices rising in debate. Tall insectoids clicked their mandibles in disapproval. Amphibian diplomats bubbled through translation devices urging caution. The long-lived elders of the seraphim species shook their heads, their silver eyes glowing faintly. "They should not have built there," hissed Councillor Dreth, a reptilian delegate whose species valued strict order. "The Silent Zone is dangerous. Everyone knows this. But the signal is real," countered Ambassador Velra, a calm aquatic being whose body shimmered in a containment field of water. "If there are humans there, they are in danger. Do we not have a duty to assist?" A murmur spread across the chamber. The word duty echoed strongly. The council had been built upon the idea of cooperation. No species was left alone in danger. Yet the Silent Zone was not like other dangers. It was not pirates or storms or reactor failures. It was something else, something even the bravest avoided. Then the human ambassador rose. Ambassador Clark was a tall figure, dressed in the formal dark blue of Earth's diplomatic corps. His expression was firm, but his eyes betrayed concern. "Yes," Clark said, his voice amplified by the chamber's systems. "That is one of ours. K-47 was established only 30 years ago as a mining outpost. It was experimental, remote but rich in resources. We believed we could tame the region with technology and vigilance. Clearly something has gone wrong." Humanity asked the council to respond. "You ask us to send fleets into cursed space?" Councillor Dreth snapped, his scaled hand slamming against his desk. "You humans never respect limits. You push, you pry, and now you bring this danger upon us all." Clark did not flinch. "We are not asking for sympathy. We are asking for help. If the distress call is true, then thousands of human lives are at stake." Silence followed. Every representative in the chamber felt the weight of the decision. To ignore the call would go against the principles of the council. To answer it meant entering the Silent Zone, a place filled with shadows and unanswered questions. Finally, the High Speaker of the Council, an ancient being of living light, spoke. Its voice was calm yet firm. "The Galactic Council cannot ignore a distress signal. We shall send a combined fleet to investigate. But we do so with caution. We go to learn, not to fight. If danger is confirmed, we shall act. And with that, the decision was made. The fleet was assembled quickly. Dozens of ships from multiple species were chosen. Scouts, carriers, medical vessels, and even a few heavily armed warships for protection. The humans sent their own ships, sleek and aggressive in design. Together, they formed a convoy that shone like a trail of lights against the darkness of space. As the fleet prepared, unease filled the crews. Many whispered of the Silent Zone stories, ships disappearing without trace, sensors going blind, strange echoes of voices where no one stood. Some officers admitted they would rather face an enemy fleet than fly into that place. On the bridge of the human flagship, the Resolute, Captain Elena Hayes stood at the viewing window, staring into the star-streaked void. She had been chosen to lead the human part of the mission, and though her face was calm, her mind raced with questions. Why had the colony been established so close to the Silent Zone? Why had no one raised alarms earlier? And most of all, what had happened to force them to send such a desperate call? "Captain," her first officer said quietly, "are you ready?" Hayes nodded. "As ready as we can be. Plot course to the coordinates. Engage at maximum speed. Let's find out what's waiting for us." The fleet moved as one, engines flaring, their path cutting directly into the edge of the Silent Zone. Stars grew dimmer. The darkness of the void seemed heavier here, pressing against their hulls. Instruments flickered. Strange readings whispered across scanners as if the very space around them resisted being measured. Inside the ships, crews grew quiet. Even hardened veterans felt uneasy. The silence outside was too deep, too absolute. Space was never truly silent. There were always signals, always faint radiation, always movement. But here there was nothing. Then, slowly, the distress beacon began to grow stronger. The pulsing signal, repeating over and over, guided them deeper into the zone. Each pulse seemed heavier, as if it carried not just information but weight. At last their sensors picked up something. A planet loomed ahead, dark and cold, circling a weak sun. Around it, drifting like ghosts, were ships, dozens of them. Some were massive, the size of cities, their hulls torn and broken. Others were smaller but equally lifeless. No power, no signals, just hulks drifting in endless circles. The crews stared in disbelief. These were not only human ships. They were ships of other species, designs no one had seen in centuries, perhaps even millennia. A graveyard of titans, and at the very center of it all, still glowing faintly, was a single human vessel. Its beacon pulsed weakly, the same words repeating, "This is Colony K-47. Immediate assistance required." Coordinates attached, yet no voices answered. No crew hailed them. No lights flickered from its windows. It was alive only in signal. Captain Hayes felt a chill spread through her chest. Something was wrong, terribly wrong, and as the fleet slowed, preparing to investigate, every species aboard felt the same fear. This was not a simple rescue. This was something else. Something that the galaxy had not faced in a very, very long time. The fleet slowed as it entered orbit around the dark planet. The ships hung like cautious hunters, their engines dimmed, their scanners reaching out across the void. Yet the void gave them little in return. The wreckage was everywhere. Broken hulls drifted in silence, their metal twisted into unnatural shapes. Some pieces floated lazily, colliding gently with one another. Others spun slowly, like corpses tumbling in space. The graveyard stretched for thousands of kilometers, as if an entire war had taken place here and then been abandoned. But this was no ordinary battlefield. The designs of the ships were unfamiliar to most of the fleet. Some hulls looked ancient, older than the Council itself. Others had strange shapes, long spirals, jagged wings, cube-like bodies, nothing like the sleek ships of modern fleets. And yet mixed among them were human ships, their gray armor and sharp lines recognizable even under scars of battle. The human flagship Resolute scanned the closest wrecks. "Captain," the sensor officer reported, his voice tense, "I'm detecting multiple ship types. Some of these models are not in any database. They are older than recorded history." Hayes leaned over his shoulder, studying the readings. The wrecks showed no power, no life signs, no signals. "Just emptiness, dead ships," Hayes whispered. "But why here? Why all gathered in one place?" No one could answer. The Council fleet gathered closer, their ships forming a protective circle. Messages flashed across channels as captains from other species debated the next move. Some argued they should leave immediately. Others demanded they investigate. Fear spread quickly, but curiosity pulled stronger. Finally, the high speaker's voice reached all ships. Proceed with caution. Send boarding teams. Learn what has happened here. The first boarding small shuttles broke away from the fleet, their engines glowing faintly in the darkness. They glided toward the nearest wrecks, some human, some alien. Grappling claws extended, docking ports latched, and the teams entered. Inside the first human ship, the corridors were silent. Dust floated in zero gravity. Tools and crates drifted aimlessly, but there were no bodies, not a single one. Lieutenant Ramos, leading the human boarding team, moved carefully through the narrow halls. His flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing scrawled words along the walls. At first, he thought they were scratches from battle. Then he read them. Do not wake it. We failed. Silence is safer. The words repeated again and again, written in English, carved by desperate hands. Ramos swallowed hard. His team exchanged worried glances. Soldiers did not carve warnings like this unless they had faced something far worse than pirates or rebels. Report back, Ramos ordered. Mark the location. Keep moving. In another wreck, an alien ship whose design was so old it had no match in council records, the boarding team found strange symbols glowing faintly on the walls. The language was unknown, but the shapes carried the same warning feel, circles with jagged lines, spirals broken by slashes, drawings of something vast with arms like machines and eyes like burning suns. The aliens in the boarding team shivered, though they did not understand why. The ship had no bodies either. Everywhere they searched, the same truth was found: no survivors, no corpses, only silence. The human vessel, at the very center of the graveyard, floated the ship that had sent the distress signal. It was old and battered, its hull torn by battle scars. The beacon on its side pulsed weakly, sending out the same message on repeat. This is Colony K-47. Immediate assistance required. Coordinates attached. A human boarding team, accompanied by alien observers, docked and entered. Inside, the air smelled stale, processed for too long. Lights flickered weakly. The life support systems groaned, still running despite years of damage. The ship's bridge was empty. Consoles blinked, showing endless loops of data. The crew was gone, but the systems had been left running as if abandoned in haste. Then the ship's core computer activated on its own. A hologram appeared, blurry, broken, but recognizable as human faces. The recordings played automatically, triggered by the intrusion. The first showed soldiers firing weapons in narrow halls, shouting orders, their voices filled with panic. Strange metallic roars echoed in the background. The second showed engineers sealing doors, their hands shaking as they carved warnings into the walls. The third was only sound, a chorus of screams that cut off suddenly. The recordings ended. The boarding team stood in silence. Even the aliens who had seen centuries of war felt a chill. Something had attacked this ship. Something powerful enough to erase the crew, yet leave the ship drifting, beacons still pulsing. The data core carried one final file. It was a simple log entry dated years earlier. If anyone finds this, do not explore further. Do not follow. We tried to destroy them, but they are endless. If you hear silence, turn back. Do not wake them. The log ended with static. Debate. Among the council, the boarding teams returned with their findings. The council fleet gathered their reports, sharing them across encrypted channels. Arguments broke out. This is madness, Counselor Dreth hissed, his scaled face filling a comm screen. The humans have meddled with something they do not understand. We should leave at once before we are dragged into their mistake. Ambassador Velra of the aquatic species spoke calmly in reply. Leaving will not solve this. If these recordings are true, then the humans discovered something dangerous. Perhaps too dangerous for any of us. Ignoring it may doom us all. On the Resolute, Captain Hayes listened silently. She did not like Dreth, but she could not deny his fear. Whatever had destroyed the colony and left this graveyard was not something ordinary. Ambassador Clark contacted her directly. His voice was calm but tense. Captain, we must learn more. The Council will not act without proof, but humanity cannot allow this to be forgotten. We need answers. That is why you are here, Hayes nodded. We'll keep searching. But if the warnings are true, we may not like what we find. The awakening hours passed as more wrecks were explored. Teams recovered scraps of data, fragments of recordings, and more desperate carvings. Patterns began to form. It seemed the Silent Zone had been a battlefield long ago. Different species had fought here, species that had vanished from history. The ships were their tombstones, but against what enemy? None of the records said clearly. Only vague warnings remained. Then, without warning, something changed. The wrecks around the planet began to stir. At first it was subtle, faint energy readings where none had existed before. Then lights flickered across ancient hulls. Engines coughed weakly. Massive structures once dead began to glow. The graveyard was not as dead as it seemed. Alarms blared across the fleet. Captains shouted orders, preparing weapons, raising shields. On the bridge of the Resolute, Hayes barked commands. "All ships, pull back!" Defensive formation. But the dead ships were not moving to attack. Instead, their systems seemed to respond to the Council fleet's presence as if awakened from slumber. The human distress beacon changed its tone. For years it had repeated the same message, but now suddenly it added new words. Warning. Containment breach. Do not activate. Do not approach. The crews froze as the beacon echoed across every channel, and deep within the largest wreck, an enormous vessel shaped like a jagged spear, something began to open. A hatch larger than a city shifted, releasing a low hum that rattled the scanners. The silent zone was not silent anymore. The horror grows panic rippled through the fleet. Ships debated retreat. Some already turned their engines toward the edge of the zone. But the humans stayed. Hayes clenched her fists. If we run now, we learn nothing. Hold position. Observe. The alien captains argued furiously, but the high speaker ordered calm. The council had come for answers, and now they had to face them. The massive spear-shaped ship continued to open, revealing dark machinery within. Great arms unfolded, dripping with starlight. Energy surged brighter and brighter until scanners could no longer measure it. The crews watched in horror. And then... silence. The ship froze, arms extended, lights glowing faintly. No attack came, but everyone understood what they were seeing. This was no ordinary ship. It was a machine, a construct from an ancient war. Perhaps even a weapon, and it was waking. Captain Hayes whispered the thought that all of them shared. The humans didn't call for rescue. They called for a warning. The fleet floated in tense silence. Every ship had its shields raised, weapons armed, and engines ready to burn at full speed. Yet no one dared to fire. All eyes were fixed on the massive spear-shaped wreck that had begun to open like a mechanical flower. Its size was overwhelming. The ship was larger than a city, longer than a continent. For centuries it had drifted in silence, its hull scarred by time and battle. Now its inner machinery was stirring, glowing with energy not seen in living memory. On the Resolute, Captain Elena Hayes stood at the center of her bridge, her eyes locked on the image filling the main display. She felt the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. This was not just a wreck, they had awakened something that had been meant to sleep forever. Status? She asked sharply. Energy levels rising, the sensor officer replied. His voice trembled as he read the screen. Unknown type. Not plasma, not fusion, not anything we've seen before. It's old, ancient, but powerful. Is it targeting us? Hayes pressed. Negative. No weapon locks detected. It's scanning maybe, or just waking. The crew exchanged nervous glances. The distress beacons change. Then the human distress beacon pulsed again. For years it had only repeated the same request for help. But now, as if triggered by the awakening ship, it changed. The voice was human, male, and ragged with exhaustion. If you are hearing this, you must turn back. We tried to contain them. We tried to stop them. We failed. They only sleep. Do not wake them. The words echoed across every ship in the fleet. Ambassador Clark, aboard the Resolute, gripped the railing tightly. His jaw clenched. This was never a rescue call. It was a warning, buried in a distress signal. They left it behind because they knew someone someday would stumble here. Counselor Dreth, speaking from his own ship, hissed through the comm. Then we should leave immediately, before these things fully awaken. I warned you this was human recklessness. Ambassador Velra, the calm aquatic diplomat, replied firmly. And if they awaken later, Dreth? If they spread? Do you wish to face them unprepared? The debate surged across channels. Fear fought with duty. Caution fought with curiosity. But no one could deny what they were seeing. Humanity had discovered something long ago, and humanity had fought it. Discoveries in the wrecks while the massive spear ship stirred. Smaller teams continued exploring nearby wrecks. What they uncovered only deepened the mystery. On one alien ship, the boarding team found a sealed chamber. Inside were rows of strange containers, pods filled with skeletal remains of a species long extinct. Their armor was broken, their weapons shattered. They had been warriors, yet even they had not survived. On a human ship, another recording was found. This one showed a briefing room. A human officer stood before a map of the silent zone. His voice was steady but grim. "We have no choice. If we leave them sleeping, one day they will wake on their own. Better to face them now when they are weak than later, when they will consume the galaxy. We fight not for victory but for time. Time for Earth, time for everyone." The recording ended there. The aliens who watched were shaken. Humanity had not entered the silent zone for greed or even by accident. They had come with purpose. They had known the danger, and still chosen to fight. Council realization. Back on the Resolute, the council leaders met through a shared holographic chamber. Their forms shimmered around the table, scaled, feathered, glowing, and human. "This is madness," Councillor Dreth repeated. His tail lashed the air in frustration. "The humans brought this on themselves. Let their colony be forgotten. We cannot fight this." Ambassador Velra shook her head. Her watery body rippled within its containment field. "You cannot ignore what you've seen. This threat is not only human. Those ancient wrecks belong to species long gone. Do you think they all perished in isolation? No, they were destroyed by the same enemy. And the humans," whispered the Seraphim Elder, their silver eyes dim with dread. The humans tried to finish what others would not. A heavy silence fell over the chamber. Ambassador Clark finally spoke, his voice quiet but steady. "You wanted to know what humanity is, counselors. This is what we are. We fight even when we know we cannot win. We fight because to do nothing is worse. My people tried to stop this not for ourselves but for everyone. And now because you ignored the silent zone for so long, you are all standing where they once stood." No one argued. The machines stir. The massive spear ship continued to unfold. Its arms spread wide, glowing brighter with every passing minute. Smaller wrecks around it also flickered with life. Shields humbly sparking, engines coughing back into motion, weapons slowly charging. But these were not true ships. They were machines, constructs. Their designs were too precise, too cold, too alien. No living crew could have built such things. Then, for the first time in centuries, a new signal pulsed from the spearship. It was not in any known language. It was a series of tones, deep and resonant, vibrating through the hulls of the council fleet. Scanners screamed with overload. The crews covered their ears as the sound vibrated through their bones, and then it stopped. Silence returned. But now the spearship's lights had focused. Directly on the fleet. "Panic in the fleet, all ships, prepare to retreat," Dreth shouted. His voice shook with fear.
"This is a death trap!"
"No," Clark snapped. "If we run now, we'll never know what they are. We'll never understand." On the Resolute, Captain Hayes watched the scanners carefully. No weapon locks yet. They're watching us, studying us, waiting. Her first officer leaned closer. "Captain, what if they're not enemies? What if they're guardians?" Hayes shook her head slowly. "Then why the warnings? Why the recordings of screams?" The officer had no answer. The fleet wavered. Some captains angled their ships for retreat. Others held steady, unwilling to turn their backs. The council was fracturing under fear. Then the beacon spoke one last time. "If you are still here, run. They are awake now." The awakening spread. Suddenly, the spearship shuddered. Energy flared across its hull. A beam of light wider than a city shot into space, striking one of the derelicts nearby. The dead ship came alive instantly, its weapons glowing, its engines burning. One by one, the other wrecks began to respond, their long sleep ending in a storm of light. The graveyard was no graveyard anymore. It was an army. Every council ship trembled as scanners lit up with hostile signals, dozens, hundreds, more than any fleet could withstand. Hayes gritted her teeth. "All ships fall back now." Engines roared as the fleet turned, burning hard away from the planet. But the machines were faster than expected. Their engines ignited with impossible speed, their weapons charged with ancient fire. The first blast struck a small scout ship, vaporizing it instantly. The shockwave rippled through the fleet, and fear spread like wildfire. The council was no longer debating. They were running for their lives. Humanity's legacy. As the Resolute fled, Ambassador Clark stood silently at the viewing window. His face was pale, but his eyes burned with quiet fury. They knew, he whispered. My people knew this would happen. That's why they fought. That's why they left the signal. They tried to buy time for us. For all of us, Captain Hayes nodded grimly. And now their time is gone. It's our turn. The words settled heavy on the crew. Humanity had not been reckless. Humanity had been brave. They had faced the nightmare while others had hidden. And now the nightmare was awake again. The machines poured from the graveyard, chasing the fleeing fleet. Their voices were deep vibrations, their weapons blazing with power. The silent zone was no longer silent. It was the beginning of something far worse. The fleet fled through the darkness of space, engines burning hot, shields straining under every pulse of energy from the machines behind them. The once silent graveyard had come alive, not as wrecks but as an army of ancient constructs, each one glowing with alien fire. The Council fleet was strong, made of many species' finest ships. But against this awakening swarm they were fragile. A single beam from the machines had already destroyed one scout vessel, and every captain knew more losses would come if they slowed. On the Resolute, Captain Elena Hayes stood firm at her command chair, watching the tactical display. Red signals multiplied on the screen, representing the enemy ships. They were faster than expected, cutting through space with a precision that looked more like instinct than strategy. Report, Hayes barked. Enemy vessels closing, her sensor officer answered. His voice shook as he read the data. They're forming formations. No, they're not just chasing. They're herding us, Hayes narrowed her eyes. Herding. It was true. The machines weren't simply attacking. They were forcing the fleet in a direction, driving them like prey. Council panic across the fleet's communication channels. Panic grew. We cannot fight them, shouted Counselor Dreth, his voice a hiss of terror. Every ship for itself. Hold formation, ordered the High Speaker, trying to bring order to the chaos. If we scatter, they will destroy us piece by piece. We must retreat together. But fear was stronger than discipline. Some ships broke away, their engines flaring as they veered in different directions. The machines reacted instantly. They split into smaller groups, cutting down the fleeing vessels with merciless beams. Each strike was precise, almost surgical. Ambassador Clark stood on the Resolute's bridge, his face pale as he watched ship after ship vanish in fire. His hands tightened into fists. They're not just weapons. They're hunters. They know exactly how to break us. The aquatic Ambassador Velra appeared on the comm screen, her voice calm but heavy. Then we cannot run forever. We must find shelter, somewhere to hide, or we will be erased. The dark world, the fleet spotted a nearby system. 2 small planets orbiting a cold star. One planet was shrouded in storms, its surface hidden under thick clouds. The other was barren, covered in ice. Options? Hayes demanded. Her first officer pointed to the storm world. The atmosphere is dense. It could hide us from their sensors, if we're lucky. Then we make for it, Hayes ordered. The fleet angled toward the storm world. Lightning flashed across its surface, storms raging endlessly. Winds strong enough to tear apart smaller craft. But it was better than certain destruction. The machines followed, but as the fleet entered the atmosphere, scanners began to falter. The storm's magnetic fields twisted signals into noise. The machines fired blindly, beams cutting through clouds but missing most targets. The fleet dove deeper, engines howling against the violent winds. Hulls shook. Shields crackled. But one by one, they disappeared into the cover of the storm. Hiding in the clouds inside the storm, visibility dropped to almost nothing. Clouds swirled around the ships, rain lashed against hulls, and thunder boomed like war drums. The fleet powered down as much as possible. Engines dimmed, weapons cooled, lights switched off. The ships floated like shadows trying to blend into the storm. On the Resolute, the crew sat in tense silence. Every sound of thunder felt like an enemy strike. Every flicker of lightning lit up the nervous faces of soldiers and officers alike. Do you think they'll follow? The first officer whispered. Hayes shook her head slowly. They'll search, but even machines can lose their prey. Ambassador Clark stood nearby, staring at the rain on the viewing window. His voice was quiet, almost broken. This is what my people feared. We thought we could fight them, end them before they rose again. But we were wrong. We only slowed them down. Velra's voice came through the comm, soft but steady. Perhaps slowing them was enough. You bought time before. Maybe now we must do the same. The machines wait for hours. The fleet remained hidden. Sensors showed faint energy signatures above the storm. Machines circling, scanning, waiting. They did not dive into the atmosphere, perhaps unwilling to risk damage. Instead, they formed a net around the planet, patient as predators. "They're not leaving," the sensor officer whispered. "They don't have to," Hayes replied grimly. "They'll wait until we come out. They know we cannot stay here forever." Supplies were limited. The ships had only so much fuel, so much food, so much oxygen. The storm gave them cover, but not safety. The broken message. Then, unexpectedly, a faint signal pierced the storm. It was human but broken, distorted by interference. "This is K-47, survivors. Still fighting. Please." The transmission cut into static. The bridge fell silent. "Survivors?" the first officer said in disbelief. Clark's eyes widened. "Impossible. That colony should have fallen decades ago." "Or maybe not," Hayes said. Her heart pounded. "If there are survivors, they know more than we do. We have to find them." Dreth's voice cut sharply across the comm. "No, it is a trap. We cannot chase ghosts while death waits above." But Clark stared at Hayes. "If even a handful of my people are still alive, we cannot abandon them. And if they know how to fight this enemy, then they may be our only hope." The debate tore through the fleet again, but this time the humans did not waver. The Resolute and 2 other human ships prepared to follow the broken signal deeper into the storm. Discovery in the storm guided by static and fragments of sound, the human ships descended. Lightning flashed around them. Winds howled, but the signal grew stronger. Finally, through the storm, they saw it, a hidden facility carved into a mountain peak, barely visible under layers of cloud. Faint lights glimmered from its surface. The ships landed nearby, braving the storm's fury. Inside the facility, they found what none had expected: survivors. Dozens of humans emerged, their faces thin, their clothes patched and worn. They carried old rifles and makeshift tools. Their eyes were hollow with years of struggle, but still burned with determination. The leader stepped forward, a scarred officer with gray streaks in his hair. He saluted sharply. "Colonel Adrian Ross, K-47 Defense. You took your time." Hayes stared in disbelief. "You've been here all this time?" Ross nodded grimly. "Fighting, hiding, holding them back. Most of us are gone. But we learned things. Things you need to hear." The truth revealed in the facility's command room. The survivors showed what they had kept safe: data logs, maps, and fragments of captured machine code. Ross explained in a tired, steady voice. "They are not ships. They are not alive in any way we understand. They are weapons. Machines built by something older than all of us. Built to fight wars none of us remember." He tapped a console and images appeared. The machines spreading through ancient star systems, burning worlds, leaving only silence. They destroyed empires before. Whole species. That graveyard you saw? It was not one war. It was many. Countless fleets came to stop them. All failed. We thought we could do better. Clark's throat tightened. "You tried anyway." Ross met his eyes. "We had to, because if we didn't, one day they would wake on their own. And when they did, the galaxy would not be ready." Hayes whispered the truth aloud. They weren't asking for help. "The distress signal was a warning." Ross nodded. "Exactly, and now? It's too late. They're awake again, and they won't stop." The weight of fear back in orbit, the machines still circled, patient and watchful. The Council fleet trembled in silence, waiting for the next move. On the storm world, the survivors' words spread like fire among the human crew. Humanity had not been reckless. Humanity had been the first to stand against a threat no one else dared face. And now, the Council realized it was their turn. Belra said softly over the comm, as if speaking to the entire fleet. "If the humans fought them with nothing but courage and desperation, what choice do we have now? We must all fight, or we will all vanish." The words hung heavy. For the first time, the galaxy began to understand the true weight of the warning. The silent zone was awake, and the storm was only beginning. The storm above the hidden facility raged with unrelenting fury, as if nature itself mourned the silence of centuries past. The surviving humans from K-47 moved quietly among the Resolute and its escort ships, sharing information and mapping what remained of the ancient machine's positions. Every flicker on the scanners, every pulse of energy, reminded the crews that the machines were awake and aware. Captain Elena Hayes stood on the bridge of the Resolute, her eyes scanning the chaotic readings on the display. The storm outside made it difficult to get clear sensor data, but even partial readings told a grim story. The ancient machines were not scattered randomly. They were moving, coordinating awakening systems across multiple star systems. The galaxy itself was starting to shake under the weight of their reawakening. Ambassador Clark joined Hayes, his face tight with worry, but his voice steady. They are faster than we expected. When humans first encountered them, we slowed them, but not for long. The galaxy has no idea what is coming. Hayes leaned over the tactical display. Then we warn them. The Council, every inhabited system, everyone must know what they are facing. Clark shook his head. Warnings are not enough. These machines do not reason. They do not negotiate. They respond only to presence. Alerting the galaxy could draw them faster. Before Hayes could respond, an incoming transmission appeared on the main display. Static filled the bridge for a moment, then a familiar, distorted human voice came through. The distress signal from K-47. If you are hearing this, know this. The machines are awake. They cannot be reasoned with. They will hunt. We fought and slowed them. Now the galaxy must fight. Use what we left behind. Do not waste this chance. Humanity tried. Humanity gave you time. Do not fail. The recording ended abruptly. Silence returned. The crew exchanged looks of understanding and fear. Preparing for the worst, the Council fleet, still hiding in the storm above the planet, debated their next move. Counselor Dreth's voice was sharp over the comm. We cannot wait. If these machines are moving across the galaxy, we must strike now. We cannot afford to stay in hiding. Ambassador Velra spoke softly but firmly. Rushing into battle without knowledge is suicide. The humans survived because they understood their enemy. They bought time. We must learn from them before we act. Captain Hayes nodded. We have the survivors. They can teach us, but time is running out. Every second we delay, more systems fall into danger. Clark gathered the human survivors in the facility's command center. Colonel Adrian Ross, the veteran leader, stood at the center. We trained for years in secrecy. We studied their movements, their behavior. We built defenses wherever we could. But even we could not stop them forever. The galaxy must now stand together, or it will face the same fate K-47 almost did. Maps lit up the room, showing the positions of the machines, energy signatures, and traces of the destroyed fleets from centuries past. Every red dot marked a destroyed world, a failed attack, or a dormant weapon waiting to awaken. Hayes's hand hovered over the console. Then we must prepare. Every Council fleet, every human vessel, every willing species, arm, train, learn, fight. The first encounter, while preparations began, a single machine detached from the main cluster and moved toward the storm world. Its massive hull glimmered faintly through the clouds, engines roaring like thunder. The Council fleet braced for contact. The machine paused above the storm, scanning with pulses of energy. Its light swept over the hidden planet, probing every sensor, every shield, every weakness. Hayes gritted her teeth. They are learning from us. They observe before striking. Colonel Ross joined her. Yes, that is why we survived before. They react to knowledge, to patterns. That is their only weakness, predictability. We must make them miscalculate. The Resolute and its human escort ships moved cautiously. They had the advantage of experience, but even they had never faced a machine of this size alone. Weapons primed, shields at maximum, they waited for the first strike. The machine's beam cut through the storm, narrowly missing a smaller human ship. Explosions lit up the clouds as energy clashed with shields. The survivors watched in tense silence, learning every pattern, every response. Lessons of humanity. After the initial encounter, Hayes gathered the survivors and officers. We survived because we learned. We can fight because we adapt. Every species here must understand that the humans' courage bought time, but knowledge will win the war. Colonel Ross nodded. We mapped weak points, predicted movement patterns, and studied energy signatures. If we pass this to every fleet, we can delay them long enough to develop stronger defenses. Humanity did not have the galaxy's support before. Now it will, Clark added. This is the truth the Council must face. Humans are not reckless. Humans fight to survive, to protect others. And that is why the galaxy may have a chance, because we fight together. The words resonated across the bridge. Even the aliens, skeptical and fearful, began to understand the truth. Humanity's bravery was not blind. It was calculated, purposeful, and willing to sacrifice everything for the galaxy. The galactic response: across the galaxy, the Council issued warnings. Planets prepared fleets, trained crews, and fortified stations. Humanity shared their data and experience, teaching other species how the machines moved, how they attacked, and how they could be delayed. The galaxy was no longer naive. Fear spread, yes, but so did determination. Species that had once ignored humans now worked with them, combining technology, strategy, and courage. Yet even as preparations unfolded, the machines continued to awaken, moving from system to system. Their numbers grew, their awareness sharpened. Every red dot in the maps marked potential disaster. Time was running out. The final transmission: as the fleet prepared to move, the survivors at K-47 sent one last transmission across every channel. This was not a distress signal, but a message meant to inspire every species. We fought. We slowed them. We gave you time. Now the galaxy must act, learn, adapt, fight. If humanity could face them alone, then together you can stand against them. Do not forget us. Use this warning. Do not fail. The words echoed across every star system. Across billions of kilometers, every listener felt the weight of the sacrifice. Hayes turned to Clark. They didn't ask for thanks. They didn't want praise. They only wanted the galaxy to survive. Clark nodded. And now it must. Humanity gave the first step. The rest of the galaxy must follow. Preparing for the long war, the Council fleet and human forces merged into a coordinated command structure. Every species contributed what they could: technology, tactics, energy weapons, fighters, and warships. Humans led the planning, teaching strategies that had once saved K-47. Hayes stood on the Resolute's bridge, overlooking the assembled fleet. Thousands of ships, hundreds of thousands of crew, representing dozens of species ready to move against an enemy the galaxy had long feared. She knew it would not be easy. The machines were ancient, powerful, and relentless. Many would fall. Many worlds might burn. But humanity had shown that courage, planning, and determination could delay the inevitable. And delay was enough to give hope. Clark joined her, looking at the stars beyond the storm. This is only the beginning. The galaxy has been warned. Humanity gave the first step, but the war is coming. We must act or the machines will not stop at the silent zone. Hayes nodded. We fight together. We survive together. And maybe, just maybe, the galaxy will finally understand why humans are not to be underestimated. Outside the storm, the machines stirred, their energy growing, their awareness spreading. The silent zone was no longer a place of forgotten fear. It was the epicenter of a galaxy-wide challenge, a threat that demanded unity, courage, and action. And across the stars, one thought began to spread among every species, whispered in command chambers across fleets, and among the civilians listening to the transmissions. If the humans could face them, even alone, what hope do the rest of us have? But for the first time, the answer was clear. Humanity had shown the way.